Following her breakup with Keith Urban, Nicole Kidman has made her first public appearance. Nicole Kidman is suspected of dating businessman Michael Weinstein after the two were spotted together in Italy. The actress has not yet commented on the relationship. Nicole Kidman sparked dating rumors after being spotted with private equity investor Michael Weinstein in Portofino, Italy. Michael Weinstein is the founder of Regent, a global private equity firm. He founded the company in 2013 and currently serves as its chairman and chief investment officer. Weinstein is also a co-founder of the USN television network. The photos, published by Page Six, attracted attention in the context of the actress having recently finalized her divorce from Keith Urban. According to the published images, Nicole Kidman was seen chatting with Michael Weinstein outside the hotel where she stayed last weekend. The 59-year-old actress wore a cream-colored silk camisole and matching satin skirt, while the businessman wore a blue shirt, shorts, and sunglasses. The two stood close together, smiling throughout their conversation. Before leaving, Weinstein even reached through the window to wave goodbye to Nicole Kidman. These moments led some viewers to question the nature of their relationship. Nicole Kidman's representative did not respond to Page Six's request for comment. These moments fueled speculation that Nicole Kidman has found a new love nearly a year after her unexpected split from singer Keith Urban. However, those involved have yet to make any official comment. To understand why these images quickly attracted public attention, it's necessary to look back at the once stable marriage between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban, as well as the events that led to their separation. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were considered the ideal Hollywood Nashville couple for over 20 years, a country music singer and Oscar-winning actress who triumphed against adversity. However, behind the duets and red carpets, everything was collapsing. According to court records, Nicole filed for divorce after 19 years, despite her efforts to keep the marriage intact. There was no wedding ring, no love song for Nicole, and changed lyrics that alluded to rewriting history in his first public appearance after the breakup. Nicole's side is finally coming to light, and the picture of the golden pair has crumbled. We examine what led to the conclusion of one of Hollywood's most famous love tales and why they were so adored. Nicole, the timid idealist who became a Hollywood star. In 1967, Nicole Mary Kidman was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, to Australian parents who were temporarily overseas. Her mother, Janelle Kidman, was a nurse and teacher, while her father, Anthony Kidman, was a scientist and clinical psychologist. The family moved back to Sydney when she was still a little kid, and she was raised in a home that valued ambition and discipline. Young Nicole was excruciatingly bashful, in contrast to the intelligent, composed person she eventually became. Her teachers were concerned that she lacked confidence, since she would blush so much when asked to speak in class. However, that shyness was accompanied by a vivid imagination. To communicate the feelings she found difficult in everyday life, she turned to performance, first in ballet, then in drama lessons, and ultimately in young theater organizations. Her brilliance was evident by the time she was in her teens. She took advantage of the booming Australian film industry at the time, gaining parts in television films before being chosen for the classic horror BMX Bandits in 1983. Her height and delicate looks set her out, but it was her emotional range that persuaded directors that she was meant for more. Hollywood began to call around the late 1980s. Nicole met Tom Cruise, her first significant love and sorrow, during her ascent. They were one of the most photographed couples in Hollywood after getting married in 1990. Nicole experienced both grief and prestige from the marriage. Tom's faith, Scientology, cast a lengthy shadow on their marriage. Although she doesn't talk much about those years, it's common knowledge that she lost both her husband and primary custody of their two adopted children, Isabella and Connor, when the marriage collapsed in 2001. This was a profound wound. Nicole felt deprived of motherhood itself and pushed to the periphery of her kids' lives, friends subsequently disclosed. The breakup would turn into one of the most significant tragedies in the life of a woman who yearned for a family of her own. She was determined to reconstruct the dream of a house and family she had lost when she subsequently met Keith Urban, which may not have been a coincidence. In the same year as Nicole, Keith, the troubled dreamer with a guitar, Keith Lionel Urban, was born in Whangarei, New Zealand, which is located across the Tasman Sea. When he was young, his family relocated to Queensland, Australia, where he developed a restless, rebellious attitude that was always looking for a way out. In addition to running a convenience store, his father, Bob, loved country music. which isn't exactly popular in Australia's suburbs. He inspired little Keith to learn how to play the guitar, and by the time he was 6 years old, he was performing. He found both identification and healing in the stories of tragedy and redemption found in country music. Despite his extraordinary musical ability, he had a less peaceful family life. He reportedly came from a tense and financially struggling household, which would have influenced his lifelong need for security. He developed both his sound and his persona as the moody rural outsider with a rock star edge while performing in talent shows and tiny bars in his teens. Soon after, he left school to focus only on music. Keith had no backup plan. Music was his only means of escape, but his skill was accompanied by demons. He was already dabbling with booze and other substances by the time he was in his 20s. When fame came, it didn't help him. It intensified the mayhem. In search of fame, he relocated to Nashville in the early 1990s. His breakthrough came in 1999 with his self-titled American debut album, following years of hard work on the road. Keith, who was renowned for his skill on the guitar, his disheveled hair, and his longing-filled voice, became the newest sensation in country music. But the success was tinged with self-destruction behind the scenes. He had already been in and out of treatment by the time he met Nicole in 2005. He was constantly afraid that his addictions would destroy all he had worked so hard to achieve. On paper, Nicole and Keith appeared to be from separate worlds: Hollywood prestige versus Nashville hard work. The burden they carried was what truly connected them. Nicole was scarred by the loss of her family and a marriage that left her suspicious of authority and treachery. Keith had the erratic temperament of a guy who had seen both stardom and obscurity, yet had never really overcome the temptation to undermine himself. Both were at pivotal moments when their paths eventually came together. With an Academy Award for The Hours and a solid reputation as one of the best actors of her time, Nicole had come out of her divorce stronger than ever. After 10 years of upheaval, she was still emotionally raw and yearned for security. In contrast, Keith was a rising star who was making a name for himself in the very competitive American country music industry. But he was being pushed to the limit by the demands of a profession that values appearance just as much as music, the perks of celebrity, never-ending touring, and temptation. Someone who could ground him and give him hope that there was more to life than stage lights was what he needed. It is difficult to ignore the foreshadowing while looking back. Keith's restless, compulsive nature was always going to collide with her need for stability and control. Healing was promised by their union. It bore the seeds of future strife, but perhaps she could reconstruct the family she'd lost, and he might find atonement in her stability. Being in a relationship with another star was risky for Nicole. She had learned the harshness of the public eye during her marriage to Tom Cruise. However, she perceived vulnerability, even fragility in Keith, which triggered her protective instincts. She served as both a mirror and a muse for him, someone whose accomplishments and self-control exposed his own volatility, but whose love allowed him to develop into the man he had always desired. Their early experiences had shaped them into complicated, damaged people. It seemed inevitable when they ultimately clashed in 2005. In actuality, though, it was more akin to erratic chemistry, coincidental encounters, and fairy tale romance. When Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban eventually met in 2005, it was widely reported as a Hollywood fairy tale. Two international celebrities from Australia who were born in the same year and had both been toughened by hardships in the past collided just when their lives appeared to be about to take a turn for the better. Their encounter was portrayed as fate by the glossy mags and red carpets. Beneath the surface, however, the connection was more about two wounded individuals holding on to the possibility of salvation than it was about fate. The first spark appeared in January 2005 during the G'day USA Gala in Los Angeles, which honored Australians employed in Hollywood. Even though Nicole had only recovered from the turmoil of her divorce from Tom Cruise, she had already established herself as an Oscar-winning actress. Conversely, Keith was a budding Nashville artist whose songs were beginning to gain widespread popularity. She subsequently said that she didn't think he was interested when they were first acquainted. He was reticent, but courteous. He didn't give her a call for months, even though they exchanged phone numbers. Years later, she said that the love affair almost ended before it started because of his initial lack of approach. However, something clicked when he eventually reached out. Once their romance started, it progressed swiftly. They were pictured together by May. By the end of the year, she was referring to him as the man who had captured her heart in interviews. He symbolized freedom to her, who had endured the oppressive scrutiny of her marriage to Tom. He was everything that Tom Cruise wasn't: passionate, unvarnished, and genuine. She was elegant, legitimate, and a calming presence that Keith had never experienced. By November, he was accompanying Nicole on red carpet events as both her partner and a date. The press fell deeply in love with the couple because of their evident connection. The golden children of Australia had met in America. They were married in a sumptuous ceremony at the Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel on Sydney's Manly Peninsula in June 2006, a little more than a year after they started dating. He looked every bit the romantic troubadour with his characteristic long hair, while she donned a Balenciaga gown with a stunning veil. Hollywood celebrities and country music icons graced the guest list, but the event's intimacy told the true tale. He allegedly serenaded her throughout the reception as she entered the chapel by candlelight, fighting back tears. For admirers, it was the ideal conclusion to their own difficult pasts. Nicole, who had suffered under the domineering control of her former lover, had discovered a guy who seemed to love her without conditions. In the meantime, Keith had found salvation in the arms of one of the most renowned actresses in the world. Regretfully, life was not as ideal as fairy tales. The first fissures. Keith checked himself into an alcohol recovery facility just 4 months after getting married. Their pleasure as newlyweds was severely damaged. Nicole was thrown into a predicament just as she was finishing her thank you notes. She was accused of marrying a time bomb by the press. The relapse was embarrassing for him. He had promised that her love would be sufficient to sustain him, but his old ways soon came back. Nicole prioritized devotion over humiliation, since she was always cautious of her personal life. She visited him in rehab and stood by him, unwilling to give the media the joy of witnessing her falter. He eventually acknowledged in interviews that she had saved his life at that time. However, insiders perceived a more nuanced picture. She had lost the opportunity to keep her marriage to Tom together. She was now putting herself in Keith's shoes as a healer and protector. She had faith in him and in second chances. For better or worse, a large portion of their marriage would be defined by that loyalty. The pair spent the ensuing years establishing their reputation as one of Hollywood's uncommon, long-lasting couples, despite the uncertain beginning. She kept taking on significant movie parts, juggling critically praised roles in movies like Rabbit Hole with blockbusters like Australia. In the meantime, he established himself as one of the biggest names in country music by traveling non-stop and taking home several Grammy Awards. They were loving in public. She once said that he was the one who revitalized her. At award events, Keith would often praise her, often crying. There was tension underneath the carefully chosen image. While she frequently filmed overseas, her profession required her to travel for extended periods of time. They even put in place guidelines like never being away for longer than a few weeks in an effort to make it work. However, sources said that their schedules often conflicted. Nicole clung to the notion of family, severely damaged by her split from Isabella and Connor Cruise. She threw herself into parenting when she and Keith welcomed Sunday Rose, their first daughter, in 2008, then Faith Margaret in 2010. He loved his kids, but he had a hard time juggling the demanding life of a touring musician with parenthood. They later effectively marketed themselves as the remedy for Hollywood's pessimism. They were praised by interviewers as evidence that true love could endure celebrity. Images of the family at the airport, with him following behind with bags and her holding the daughters, strengthened the impression that they were a close-knit family. However, their relationship had deteriorated under the surface. His continuous struggle to maintain sobriety was a persistent issue. Friends said that the couple's disagreements went deeper than either of them acknowledged, and her need for stability occasionally translated into control. Nevertheless, they continued, determined to keep the fairy tale alive. Their early years together had been characterized by the rapid intensity of falling in love, getting married quickly, and overcoming the problem very instantly. They never really slowed down to address the fissures in their foundation because of that zeal. They maintained the facade of a redeemed bad kid and his patient rescuer for over 20 years. Nobody realized at the time that the same whirlwind energy that had led them to love would ultimately cause them to experience heartache. As with reality, the fairy tale was always brittle and based on performance and hope. However, the strain was increasing. Under pressure, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had already endured more hardship than most couples could go through in a lifetime by the time they were in their first 10 years of marriage. A persistent undercurrent of strain resulted from rehab just months after the wedding, lengthy separations brought on by work obligations, and juggling parenting two girls in the public glare. Nevertheless, they continued to be a representation of tenacity for many years. Rumors of tension started to appear more often around the middle of the 2010s. Arguments about timetables, Keith's lifestyle, and even Nicole's intensity were whispered. In interviews, the pair frequently put on a unified face while continuously refuting the rumors. Nicole would frequently assert that they had never been stronger, and Keith would agree, calling Nicole his rock. However, no matter how well concealed, fractures have a way of coming to light. She had become more tired of bearing the emotional burden of his difficulties, according to those close to the marriage. She was concerned about his mental equilibrium, even if she appreciated his artistic ability. In contrast, Keith occasionally responded negatively when he was portrayed as the one in need of saving. Instead of becoming her project, he supposedly wanted to be her equal. The very thing that tore them apart was what held them together for so long. That was the contrast between them. Though she dreaded it, Nicole liked his vulnerability. Although he admired her strength, he felt overpowered by it. Their marriage was a never-ending balancing act between desire and weariness, between saving and resisting. The public narrative that they were the love tale that had overcome all obstacles persisted throughout. Few were aware of the amount of work required to keep up that illusion. How much of their personal energy was devoted to maintaining the facade? There was a great deal of pressure to live up to their image. They were more than just a husband and wife. They were the embodiment of hope for fans who wanted to think that love could endure addiction, distance, and fame. Every picture and public gesture became part of the mythology, but mythology can be both inspiring and depressing, as history frequently demonstrates. Nicole and Keith had become prisoners of their own fairy tale. Their differences were also evident in how they raised their girls. Nicole placed a strong emphasis on regularity, consistency, and protecting her kids from the craziness of celebrity, keeping in mind the lessons she learned from her own broken family. As the playful dad, Keith tended to be lenient. Although their girls loved both parents, rumors circulated that Nicole occasionally felt undercut, and he occasionally felt chastised for not taking things seriously enough. These clashes weren't as explosive as the headlines would have you believe. They were more subdued splits, the type that gradually erode closeness and trust. The tabloid rumors, followed by a divorce. Tabloids started speculating about marital problems as the 20s got underway. Arguments, time spent apart, and whispers of Keith's past demons were all mentioned. Nicole and Keith, who frequently showed up together shortly after a story emerged, both denied the accusations. In interviews, Nicole would claim, "We've never been stronger," beguiling doubters with her cool demeanor. However, there was validity to the rumors underlying those denials. Keith was still struggling with sobriety. Insiders said that she never completely overcame her dread of recurrence, even if there is no proof that he declined as sharply as in the past. She continued to be watchful, sometimes to the point of stress. Even when Keith was doing everything correctly, it may feel oppressive to be watched and questioned. For her part, Nicole became tired of being the center of attention all the time. She loved him, but she yearned for harmony, for a marriage where she wouldn't have to worry about the next storm all the time. The contrast between their public and private identities was perhaps the most obvious indication of their disintegration. In private, they were revolving around unsolved problems, wandering and arguing. They intensified the fairy tale in public. Their red carpet outings grew more and more significant, as if they were putting on shows for themselves rather than the cameras, reminding the public and each other of the love tale they had once believed in. Keith would hold Nicole's hand tightly at events, caressing her shoulder and murmuring in her ear. She would grin calmly, but onlookers could see that it was more practiced than natural. Like performers rehearsing lines they had long since committed to memory, the devotion appeared genuine but forced. Unspoken grievances are a part of any marriage, but in theirs, they became more vocal with every year that went by. Nicole was said to have disliked his reliance on her strength and his desire for her to serve as both his wife and his rescuer. He hated her power and her ability to use military precision to control not just herself, but also him, their kids, and their reputation. The couple's close friends characterized their relationship as one of continual compromise. She yearned for stability, while he yearned for freedom. She wanted tranquility, while he desired passion. Their needs were rarely in harmony, yet neither was incorrect. The murmurs grew louder in 2023 and 2024. It was implied by anonymous individuals in entertainment publications that they were together but living different lives. As she began going to events by herself, paparazzi images started to corroborate the allegation. In the meantime, both of them avoided answering questions about one another in interviews, and he was seen touring without his wedding band. Nevertheless, the pair rejected the collapse story. Nicole frequently talked about how hard marriage was, an acknowledgement that was both humble and illuminating. She was everything to him, he would insist. Even as his utterances started to seem less like impromptu statements and more like rehearsals of an old screenplay. But in the end, every unraveling has a turning point, and theirs occurred in the summer of 2025. The gaps had grown into fissures at that point. She was withdrawing from the circus of rumors and spending more and more time with her daughters. In the meantime, he devoted all of his energy to music, going on more tours, and expressing his feelings in sometimes confessional performances. The choice to split up wasn't dramatic, according to those closest to them. There was no last dispute, no single scandal. Rather, it was the gradual realization that they could no longer support one another. Heartbroken but unwavering, Nicole realized that she could no longer be a caregiver and a spouse. Keith decided to back off since he was tired of Nicole's expectations. The public gasped when she eventually filed for divorce in late September 2025, citing irreconcilable differences. However, the conclusion seemed unavoidable to those who had been paying careful attention. For over 2 decades, these two had crafted one of Hollywood's most beloved tales, one of salvation, tenacity, and enduring love. Even while the legal document's language was simple, just irreconcilable differences, it bore the weight of a far more nuanced narrative, with each step revealing the unvarnished reality of a marriage that had been battling to endure for a long time. What transpired was not just a formal separation, but also a highly visible unmasking. The couple had kept a family residence in Davidson County, Tennessee, where Nicole filed. The paperwork was simple, even limited, yet it had far-reaching consequences. She was leaving after 19 years of marriage, 2 kids, and innumerable assurances of unwavering love. She reportedly struggled with the choice for months, according to insiders. She had been devoted to keeping the family together, particularly for Sunday and Faith, their children. However, she realized that she couldn't rescue herself and the marriage, as one acquaintance put it. She had been his pillar of support against addiction, and the organizer in a relationship that was frequently characterized by turmoil for many years. In the end, she opted for self-preservation, and it was evident from the forms that she wanted primary residential custody of the daughters, with him having shared decision-making authority. Interestingly, both parties waived child and spousal support, indicating that their funds had long been kept apart. Heath's response was louder, harder, and far more noticeable than her filing, which was the silent proclamation of the end. He was spotted a few days after the divorce was announced, and most significantly, his wedding band was absent. If that wasn't obvious enough, he changed the words to 2 of his hit songs during his first performance following the divorce. He exposed a maelstrom of emotions in front of thousands of fans at his Pennsylvania concert, turning what could have been simply another stop on his high and living global tour into a buzzing public reckoning with his personal life. He quickly indicated that this would be more than a typical country performance, as he performed for the first time since it was announced that he and Nicole Kidman were divorcing after over 20 years of marriage. Throughout the evening, his behaviors fluctuated between anger, heartbreak, and an almost sensitive sense of nostalgia. He went onto the stage without his wedding band, a symbolic move that the crowd did not miss. When he changed the line, "Take your space and take your reasons to take your unreasonable reasons" in his 2004 breakup anthem, "You'll Think of Me," it caused the most gasps. Many saw this as a thinly veiled jab at Nicole and their failing marriage. In contrast to the image he permitted to play during Heart Like a Hometown, where pictures of him and their 2 teenage daughters appeared in a slideshow, this unfiltered outburst, spat out with obvious frustration, seemed to be a reluctant nod to his family even in the midst of strained relationships. The fighter, A 2016 song that is thought to have been directly inspired by his relationship with Nicole and frequently performed with her in mind was totally removed from his setlist, as fans observed, indicating a purposeful erasing of their shared past from his stage shows. As if to remind himself and the audience of the passion that had carried him long before fame, marriage, and controversy, he talked openly about his early years in between songs, remembering how his parents urged him to drop out of school to pursue music. The emotional roller coaster continued as rumors circulated about his alleged intimacy with younger musician Maggie Baugh, who was conspicuously absent that evening. Due to viral videos of him serenading her at previous performances with modified lyrics that had resurfaced online, her shadow continued to loom over the performance. The intrigue and drama surrounding his private life were only heightened by this absence and his intentional setlist alterations. It was evident by the conclusion of the evening that his performance had evolved beyond a concert. The media landscape was quickly turned upside down by Keith's spectacular concert and the divorce proceedings. We are grateful that you saw our video. To learn more about your favorite celebs, remember to like and subscribe. Please feel free to express your thoughts and any questions you may have in the space provided for comments below. We appreciate your presence and look forward to seeing you again soon.